The Asics Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, without a doubt the best execution of the Sky concept to date. Before I jump into the actual review, let's step back and talk about the Metaspeed series conceptually since its launch back in early 2021. Now, top-tier super shoes generally work in a combination of the foam and the plate or the stiffening agent in the shoe and how those two materials work together. We've seen this in the Nike Vaporfly and Nike Alphafly. We also see this in the Adidas Adios Pro and Adidas Evo. Even though those are rods, it's still about how the foam and the stiffening agent or the carbon plates or the carbon rods work together in the midsole of the shoe. However, Asics engineers always felt like they've taken a very different approach, which makes sense because Asics engineering always sort of goes its own way and really comes up with really great solutions. And the solution that I feel like Asics engineering has always tried to achieve with the Metaspeeds is an either or. Either you want the feel or the roll of a plate, or you want to be able to use the foam and the resilience that's in the foam, and it's not both. It's one or the other. And that's why we see the Metaspeed Edge and the Metaspeed Sky. The Edge is the low plate configuration because the plate is very close to the ground, so you're rolling forward off the plate. And the Sky has always been more foam. You're using the resilience of the foam to really activate that shoe, to power that shoe, the engine of that shoe. Now, the problem that Asics has always had is they've never really had the foam to really make this work. FF Turbo back in 2021 and 2022 with the original Metaspeed and the Metaspeed Plus series wasn't it. It wasn't on par with the rest of the super foams out there, at least the top tier super foams. It just didn't have the resilience. It was very stiff, kind of very blocky, a little bit dead. And I think the Metaspeed Edge worked much better because you're getting the roll of the plate in that. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about with high plate or low plate configuration, link in the description to a video that goes into detail about the distinction and what is different between those. Also happens to be about the Metaspeeds. So if you want to know more about that, check the video description for that video. And that's why I do think the Metaspeed Edge has always been the better Metaspeed, at least from a feel standpoint, because you had a stiff, firm, non-resilient foam in FF Turbo back in 2021 and 2022. So all that shoe could really do was roll you off the plate. And Asics carbon fiber plates are very, very stiff. So the Edge was always probably the best performing shoe because you were just rolling off the edge of that shoe or off the plate, off the toe in that shoe. Back in 2021, when the original Metaspeed Sky and Edge launched, they were actually both low plate configuration shoes, as you can see here. The difference was the Sky just had more foam in the forefoot. And that was really, again, where I think Asics engineers were trying to use resilience of foam in the Sky and the roll of the plate in the Edge. However, by the Plus series, we saw Asics now move to the high plate configuration in the Sky, and they left the Edge with the low plate configuration. By 2022, Alphaflies were pretty common. I have no doubt that Asics engineers saw that shoe, and they really doubled down on the idea of putting the plate very close to the foot, the very stiff Asics carbon fiber plate right under the foot, to stabilize the foot and provide a platform to load the resilient foam between the plate and the ground. And that's what the Sky Plus really was doing. Unfortunately, it was still on FF Turbo. Foam didn't really work. Again, the Metaspeed Edge, I think, was the better shoe in that series. Moving forward into last year, 2024, we got the Paris series. Now, the Paris series streamlined the shoe. They really refined the shoe, made it a much more racy shoe, really great shoe. But the update to FF Turbo Plus foam was a huge game changer. FF Turbo Plus was a much better foam, much more resilient. Not quite top tier yet, but very, very close. Now you could actually engage some of the resilience in the foam. However, the difference between the Metaspeed Edge and the Metaspeed Sky Paris last year was very minimal. You could feel there was a difference, and there was a difference. But again, FF Turbo Plus, even though it was a big step forward, still wasn't quite there. So again, I think last year the Metaspeed Edge Paris was probably still the best Metaspeed. It was the best execution because you were getting now a more resilient foam, but you're getting that super stiff carbon fiber plate really close to the ground on the forefoot. So you're getting a really rolling shoe that did have some pop now from the resilience of the foam. But FF Turbo Plus didn't have enough resilience to really make the concept of the Sky work as well as it really should. Though I know people did like the Sky Paris last year. And that brings us to this year, to the Tokyo series. And now, with the addition of this new thing, FF Leap Foam, Asics finally has a foam that has the resilience to make the concept of the Sky work. And the Sky Tokyo is fantastic. Starting with the specs on this shoe, we still have 39.5 millifoam in the heel, 34.5 millifoam in the forefoot, giving you a 5 mil drop. I'm going to say because this foam is much more compressive and you have so much more of the FF Leap Foam in the Sky over the edge, the real drop in this shoe is a little bit lower, 2 to 5 mil. The weight of the shoe comes in around 160 grams. Asics has specified 159 to get under that 160 gram mark. It's around that range, as you can see from the pair that I bought. It's a little bit over that, but it's still an extremely lightweight shoe. And the ride profile for this shoe is a bounce. The only way I can describe this as bounce. And it's because of the foam and a lot of the configuration of the midsole in this shoe that give you that. And quickly comparing the Sky Tokyo with last year's Sky Paris, from a stack height standpoint, they're identical. They're the same dimensions. The drop is still 5 mil in both, but as I said, in the Sky Tokyo, because FF Leap is such a softer foam, it can feel a little bit lower depending on how you're standing and weighting the shoe, whereas in the Sky Paris, with all FF Turbo Plus foam in the midsole being firmer, you definitely feel a 5 mil or very low drop. Both shoes are quite comfortable. The weight in the Sky Tokyo is lower. They've shaved some weight off, but these are both extremely lightweight racing super shoes. And the ride profile of the Sky Tokyo, as I just said, is bounce. That's the only way I can describe that shoe. Whereas in the Sky Paris, it's very direct. You don't quite get the same dynamic feel that the Sky Tokyo gives you. You just get a much more direct ride underfoot. If we look at the outsole between the Tokyo series and the Paris series, this is where we begin to see, I think, one of the two big differences between these two generations of shoes. And that is in the midfoot and the heel of the Tokyo series. There is considerably more width in that area of the shoe. As you can see, the forefoot between the Sky Tokyo and the Sky Paris is very similar, but look how much wider the midfoot and the heel is in the Tokyo series. It's substantial given this is a very lightweight racing super shoe. And if we look at these shoes from behind, again, a little bit hard to tell with product photography, but look at how much less of the forefoot you can see in the Tokyo series than you can see in the Paris series. That's because there's so much more material in the midfoot and heel of the Tokyo series trying to give the system as much stability as they can, solving one of the key problems with the Paris series from last year. And that fundamental problem last year with the Paris series was that it was a very narrow, very tall shoe in a very firm foam. So it was a very tippy design. If you are on straight, fast, great pavement, you never noticed it. But if you're on off-cambered roads, rough pavement, or a very twisty course, you began to notice that because the tippiness of the shoe, it just always wanted to go one way or the other. It was almost like you were going to roll your ankle anytime you had to pivot on that shoe. And that's why I think Asics engineers spent so much time trying to widen out the midfoot and the heel of the Tokyo series to resolve that problem. I don't have a Paris series here to actually show you and compare these two, but you can even just look at this shoe and just how much more material is built up around the midfoot and the heel of this shoe. Again, Asics engineers have really tried to make a much more stable platform back here so this shoe didn't feel quite as tippy as before. However, this shoe is still somewhat unstable, but the instability now in this shoe comes from the softness of FF Leap Foam, especially in the Sky. This shoe I would consider now wobbly instead of tippy, and I'll take wobbly over tippy anytime. And the difference is, as I've already said, tippy is narrow and high where it feels like you're going to roll your ankle anytime you're in off-cambered or trying to pivot on that shoe. Wobbly is more instability because the foam is so soft. The softer foam is more compliant to the ground, so you feel the off-cambered roads or the rough pavement or even the corners a little less in a wobbly shoe. However, you are getting some instability because of the softer foam. But I will take wobbly for instability over tippy anytime, because you can train to get used to wobbly. You can strengthen your ankles and your lower leg to give you that stability, whereas tippy, you could have the strongest ankles and lower leg possible, but tippy is still tippy and it's always going to feel that way. I definitely think there's a huge improvement to the Tokyo series over the Paris series in stability. Though, keep in mind, this is still a very stripped down racing super shoe, so stability is not at the forefront for this shoe. I actually have always favored the Metaspeed Edge from the beginning. I've always liked that more direct plate on the ground feel, that roll of the plate. I like a low plate configuration shoe. I'm a Vaporfly runner primarily. And last year's Edge Paris, I think, was probably the best execution of the concept of the edge that Asics engineers have been trying to do. You had a very stiff plate, very close to the ground. You still have very stiff foam, but FF Turbo Plus did have resilience, so you're getting the roll and the snap of the carbon off the toe in the edge, and you're getting some resilience of the foam in that shoe. I think it worked beautifully. It could be a little harsh. I heard a lot of people complain how harsh this shoe could be, especially for longer distances, half and full marathons. But it was a fast shoe, and I reviewed that as such on this channel. But again, when I went to try on the Tokyo series this year, I immediately felt that the Edge Tokyo was completely off. The feel of the firmer foam in the heel and the softer foam in the forefoot, even as a forefoot striker, just felt strange to me. Also, because the foam is so soft in the forefoot of the Edge, the rocker point just felt way too far back in that shoe, and the transition of how that shoe rolled just felt very off to me, especially coming from last year's Paris series and the Edge Paris, which was exceptional. But as soon as I put on the Sky Tokyo, I immediately felt this shoe felt amazing. It felt really good. The late stage rocker that's in this shoe is generally something I don't love, but because this FF Leap foam is so soft, and as a forefoot striker striking this foam, I'm sort of flattening out the rocker point in this shoe. It doesn't really matter where the rocker point is in the shoe because the foam is so soft. I'm compressing that foam, and as I'm rolling forward, I am getting a pop off the toe as the foam pushes me out, and the stiff plate actually gives me the snap off the toe. And in some ways, that's why I picked the Sky Tokyo this year, because this shoe just runs much more natural to me, especially as a forefoot striker. When I have been testing this shoe, heel striking and midfoot striking, as far as super shoes go, I'm not finding any real drastic instability in the shoe. Again, it's a wobbly shoe because of the soft foam, but it's no worse than any other top tier super shoe that's out there. In fact, I would actually say this shoe is a little bit better, especially as you grow accustomed to it and you begin to strengthen your lower leg and your foot to give your body that stability that a shoe like this actually needs. The configuration of the high plate that's very close to the foot, that's giving the foot a very stable platform to push and compress all of this FF Leap foam between the plate and the ground, is really just the best execution of this concept, the Sky concept, as I said in the intro. This is that shoe that Asics engineers have always been trying to use the resilience of the foam to really give you the engine of this shoe. And finally, with FF Leap in this shoe, they have that, and it, again, works wonderfully. Let's talk about the upper on this shoe, since we're doing this review in reverse. One of the things I've always loved about the Metaspeed since the first generation is their race uppers. Asics race uppers have always been exceptional. They are as stripped down and minimal as you can possibly be. And this one's no different. It is a slight change and update from the Paris series. Asics has called this Motion Wrap 3.0. Last year was 2.0. The textile in this shoe seems a little bit lighter, a little bit more open, a little bit softer, more compliant to the foot than the Paris series last year, but there's not a massive difference. If you liked the upper on the shoe last year or you didn't like the shoe on the Paris series, this one's not really going to change your mind. But again, this is just the most stripped down, minimal race upper that you could possibly put on a shoe. One change they have made to this is they've taken some of the padding out of the ankle collar in the shoe. In the Paris series, the padding ran almost up into the eyelet chain. This one, as you can see, it stops kind of right here. It just really is protecting the Achilles. I'm someone who runs only in no-show socks. I've not had any issues with this. There's no rubbing, there's no chafing or anything in here. So this is the right amount of foam. I wouldn't really stress too much about this. I wasn't having any issues with this. Otherwise, the fit of this upper is very similar to last year's Paris series in the way the tongue fits, in the way the eyelet chain works, in the way it hugs the foot. Though again, this new Motion Wrap 3.0 material is just a little bit more compliant to the foot, wraps around the foot a little bit better, giving you a slightly better, more consistent lockdown across the entire foot. Sizing and fit on this one, this is true to size for me, US men's size 9. Again, my foot's on the smaller size of my size, and Asics race shoes do fit small, but they fit like spikes almost. They're not quite track spike, but they do fit very small. They do fit very tight. They're a very aggressive race fit on this shoe. And I think for an Asics Metaspeed and Asics race shoe, that's really important to get a very, very tight, very close to the foot fit, because where your foot is in relationship to the plate dynamics, especially in the sky, is really important. You want the curve of the forefoot of the plate to be right under the ball of your foot. If the shoe's too big for you, it's going to be in the wrong place, and it's always going to feel a little off because there's going to be too much material ahead of the foot. So with this shoe, I would say start true to size. Whatever shoe you wear from Asics, start with that size, but only from starting there, maybe you go up half a size if there's not enough length. This is going to be a very narrow shoe. This is going to be a very aggressive race fit. If you have a wide foot, probably not the shoe for you. But if you have a wide foot and you're used to very narrow super shoes, this one's going to be more compliant to the foot, again, because of this Motion Wrap 3.0 upper, but length is going to be the challenge in this shoe. You want this as tight fitting as possible, and for me, that was totally true to size. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, the engine of this shoe, which I've spent most of this video talking about, this is the other key change in this shoe, the addition of FF Leap foam. This is what makes this shoe work so very well, and it's because of the softness and the resilience of this foam as to why. And if we look at where the new FF Leap foam sits on the spectrum of the top super shoe foams, you can see that it's somewhere between the Pebax Zoom X, the ones in the Vaporfly and Alphafly, and the new Lightstrike Pro that's in the Adios Pro 4. It is as resilient now as both those foams, and you can see that's a change up from FF Turbo Plus last year, which wasn't quite as resilient. The only foam that was less resilient of the top super foams was Lightstrike Pro Evo, but that foam worked very differently from the rest of the foams on this. Lightstrike Pro Classic, the older Lightstrike Pro, is still that more direct spring-like ride. FF Turbo Plus was a little bit closer to that, but again, FF Leap now is definitely the softer foam compared to the rest of the foams that Asics has had in the Metaspeeds to date. And that's important because the concept of the Sky, again, has always been about the foam in this shoe. It's always been the high plate right under the foot, allowing you to load up the foam between the foot or the plate and the ground and getting the resilience of that foam. FF Leap finally delivers that, and that's why I'm saying this is the best execution of the Sky concept that Asics has done to date. And you really immediately feel how much more dynamic this FF Leap foam is from any foam Asics has had before. In case in point, this shoe, the Metaspeed Ray, this is essentially the Sky stripped down and really pushed about as far as it can possibly go. This is a full FF Leap midsole with this tiny little carbon fiber 4-foot plate. I would even call this a plate at this point. It really is just a stability element under the ball of the foot, goes a little bit into the midfoot to really give you the ability to compress the foam under the ball of the foot. And that's, again, I think the most extreme execution of the Sky concept. That's in the Metaspeed Ray. Additionally, if you look at the shape of the plate between the Sky and the Edge in the Tokyo series, you can see that the plate in the Sky is very foot-shaped. It's there to support the foot, to give the foot a single stable platform to compress the foam under it, very differently from the plate that you see in the Edge, which is more about rolling you forward. It's not foot-shaped, it's really just a lever to allow you to roll off the toe in that shoe. Really a key difference here between how these two shoes work. And that finally brings me to the ride of this shoe. The only way I can describe the ride of this shoe is smooth. I am not at the level of fitness right now to really be pushing this caliber of super shoe to really testing its full range of capability, but I did put enough time into the shoe, doing some faster running, some shorter faster runnings, a lot of 400s, 800s, and 1K repeats in this shoe to get the feel for this shoe. And I'm really impressed with just how smooth this shoe is. As I've already said, as a 4-foot striker, I'm finding this softer FF Leap foam kind of compresses and the rocker kind of goes away for me on the initial strike. However, when I start to toe off, the late stage rocker finally comes into action, rolls me forward, and the stiffer plate in the shoe finally gives me a little snap off the toe as the FF Leap foam pushes me out. It's a really distinct feeling, which I've always associated with the Sky, but it just never really worked in the Sky because the foam was just never there in the previous generations. Finally, the concept of the Sky works extremely well for me underfoot. And again, the only way I can describe this shoe is silky smooth. Whether that's easy pacing, just kind of jogging, doing warm-ups, or kind of resting between sets, to all-out max effort 5K pace or even faster in this shoe works exceptionally well for all of that range. I do hope to be racing later this year, and this fall I will be spending a lot more time doing faster, longer running, and this will be a shoe that I'll probably be depending on quite a bit. I don't think I'll be racing in this shoe, but definitely as a training tool, this is a shoe that I definitely want to spend quite a bit of time in because I love the way it feels, and I love the way this really engages the forefoot and gives me the confidence to really strike on the forefoot and roll forward off the toe. It's a really incredible feeling. I will be back with this video compared to some of the other top super shoes of 2025 as I look at metrics and really break down, is this shoe actually performing as well as it feels on foot compared to some of the other top super shoes that I'm running in 2025, including whatever shoe I actually end up racing in. I will say overall, I'm really happy with this generation of Metaspeeds. Again, I think this is the best execution of the Sky to date. I don't think it's a super shoe for everyone. I think it's a little bit too minimal. It's a little bit too aggressive. Still is a little bit unstable for some runners. But for runners who like a much more stripped down, much more aggressive, much more direct super shoe or race shoe underfoot, especially if they prefer the high plate configuration where you're really loading a lot of foam between the foot and the ground, I don't think you can look past the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo because it's very, very good, and it's a very, very good execution of that concept. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. If neither one of those options are good for you, leave a comment, leave a like, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.